Morning warriors and welcome to Why Shy Why. I want to get a little bit more in depth with Scrum today, specifically around a checklist, because that's, I think, one of the things that's missing, um, available in the world. But basically I'm seeing a whole bunch of teams that think that they are doing Scrum, but they're missing some really important bits. And Scrum is really one of those things that you either do the whole thing over or do nothing at all. Okay, so there's a link underneath this video. Download the checklist and we'll walk through it together, and so you can see whether you are doing it or how much of Scrum you're actually doing or not. Okay, so now you've got the checklist, you've pretty much seen everything I'm going to talk about. Okay, so I'm going to whiz through this stuff real quick because it is one of those things, like I said, you've got to do all of those things to actually get into Scrum is an inspection and adaptation loop, right? So you inspect something, you look at it, you adapt it, then you loop back and you keep going again, right? That whole loop concept has its history goes back hundreds of years, right? And so Scrum is just an implementation of something that's been working for hundreds of years. But there are some specific things that you need to be thinking about, right? So let's start with the checklist. First of all, you need to have a Scrum team. A Scrum team can be plus or minus 2 from a team of 7, right? So 5 through to 9 people. No more, no less. If you have a smaller Scrum team, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that you're not going to get the sort of, what's what I'm looking for, value that you would implementing something else, okay? The Scrum team must be comprised of a Scrum Master role, yes, a Product Owner role, and then a Scrum team. Yep, the Scrum team will be technical and non-technical stuff. You're talking BAs, testers, developers, architects, blah, blah, blah. But they don't really have a title in a Scrum world. They're just the Scrum team. Cool. And also, you've got to think that they're also very multidisciplinary and cross-functional. So this is really hard to achieve. So take your time with this because you're talking about people now. But you do not have a back-end developer in a Scrum team. You only have full-stack developers. Okay. And the reason for that is something we can talk about later on. But you do need to have all skill sets across the whole team, and that will take time to do. Okay. Okay. Number 2, you need to have a product backlog. That is just a bunch of stuff you need to do. A to-do list. Okay. Needs to exist in a Scrum team, otherwise you're not doing Scrum. Then you've got to have planned time boxes of sprints, right? I recommend fortnightly or 2 weekly sprints, but they could be 3 weekly or up to a month, right? Or I would say 4 weeks because it makes it easier to sort of schedule. These sprints need to be uniform in time length, right? So you can't have a 2-week one and then a 3-week one, then a 2-week one, then a 4-week one. You'd have them uniform, okay? And they would be end to end. Usually, they would be end to end. So they start on a Tuesday, they go for 2 Tuesdays, the next one starts on the next Tuesday or Wednesday, okay? And so you'd have them end to end. The sprint itself will have its own backlog, which is a subset of the product backlog. Yeah, I'm not sure if you followed that, but basically what you're saying is that you have a product backlog of to-do things for the product or for your project, but now you also have a smaller subset of those to-dos in your sprint that I need to get done in the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever your sprint length is. Okay. And then you've got to end sprints. This is really important and not many. There's one of the places where I find teams fall off the cliff a little bit. At the end of a sprint, you have to have a increment of a potentially shippable product, right? You have to have something that you're going to release, or at least potentially release, waiting for a window or some testing or whatever is fine. But there needs to be something that your team has built that's releasable, okay? Not just documentation, not just half of a feature, like just the database work and not the front-end work. You can't do that. You've got to have it shippable, okay? So at any one point, when say the product owner comes in and says, you know what, we're not doing sprints anymore, you can ship everything you've done to date and it will work fine, all right? Okay, so that's the sprint. Now, within the sprint. You've got to talk about meetings. So here's a few more things that you have to check off your list. A daily scrum must be done, or a daily stand-up, whichever way you want to say it. Same thing. 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? And what's going to stop you? What are your impediments? Okay? Have to be coming out of every team member in a daily scrum every day. All right. Number 2, the end of a sprint must have a retrospective. Now, retrospective can involve everybody or can involve just the scrum team. Okay? It's up to you how you guys feel about that. But what you're doing is you're thinking about how the last sprint went. Okay? I tend to ask my team to ask 4 questions of themselves. What worked well? What didn't work so well? What to improve? What are the challenges in the future? Like, what's going to challenge us? What do we know that we don't know? And also, what things have we been learning? Okay, so they're the 4 questions you want to be asking in a sprint review. In a sprint retrospective, although they don't have to be that format. Okay, a retrospective is really just a time for the team to sit down and talk about what happened and just talk. Okay. Now, sprint review. These things used to be called showcases. They're not called that anymore because of the plasticky nature of the word showcase. So a sprint review is really talking about what got built and let's show the rest of the team. And again, this is one of those scenarios where you could have outside stakeholders in so they can see see firsthand what's been built in the sprint. Okay, it's one of the key things here, guys, is to not make it a presentation mode, right? All you're doing is showing your team what you worked on, basically. This is something we do all the time anyway. Now it's just got a time slot for it. Easy, right? Okay, and then there's 2 other meetings that you would be doing if you were full Scrum. They're called Sprint Planning 1 and Sprint Planning 2. But basically what you're thinking about now is what's happening in the next sprint, at the start of a sprint, right? What to-do items in your product backlog are you going to take and put into your sprint backlog as a subset for your next sprint? That's one thing. The other thing is you're going to start thinking about breaking down those items into what are the tasks that are involved in getting this thing done. How long will it take in terms of estimation? You might do some sort of wide band estimation like planning poker to get that done, but it's all going to be within your Sprint Planning 1 and Sprint Planning 2. Okay? And then the last thing, guys, as a checklist item, you have to have a task board. Okay? Whether that's online on a system because you don't have a co-located team, or it could be up on the wall if you do have a co-located team. Have something that shows the progression of of to-do items through the sprint and all the phases that you have in that. Okay? Alright, guys, that's it. Use the download. Please get in touch if you're not understanding some of those things. We're happy to help with any of that. If you think there's someone out there as a developer or there's a development team out there that might find some use in this video, please share this with them and let them know that we're happy to help them as well. Okay, guys, we have a new blog as well. I've left the link underneath the video. Please jump on there and have a bit of a read. It's not all tech. There's a bit of fun in there as well. So feel free. Thanks again for your attention. I hope to see you next week.